we'd like to welcome you, David. Thanks for coming onto the pod. And I'd like to just jump right in. And I feel like this is a place and time where we're going to learn something. We've been learning something all day here at the first day of our recording at the GrantSummit. And I also just want to let people know who are listening or watching this that it is at the conference. We're in an exhibit hall that's right in front of us that y'all can't see. So you might hear some noises. And it's not us acting up. It's just people enjoying their time here.
True story.
Yeah. So speaking of things we're going to enjoy hearing about, we always want to know your origin story as a grant professional. And we're curious, are you the one in a million who, when you were 5 years old, looked at your parents and said, when I grow up, I want to be a grant professional? No?
Nope, that's not me.
Okay, lay it on us.
One day.
Well, thank you for having me here. I'm really
You're
delighted
so
to be
welcome.
here. And it's a great question, and it's one I always marvel at how grant professionals came to be grant professionals, because everyone has so many different paths that they took to get here.
Yeah.
And for me, I started off at the beginning of my career, I was, believe it or not, a Russian and East European studies specialist.
You're the
And-
second one we've talked to at GrantSummit.
What are the odds?
a Russian language specialist? Wow. Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
That's
That's
kind of wild.
who knew? Maybe there's a secret link. We'll uncover that later, but for now.
for now.
But for now.
So I did some graduate work in Russian and East European studies, and then started working for nonprofits that were doing international cultural exchange, research exchange,
Okay.
educational exchange with the countries of the former Soviet Union. This was, I'm dating myself, but this was back in the 1990s.
Yeah.
Very
Hey.
exciting time for all of that. And I was in charge of programs. So I was on the program side of things, running these
Okay.
international research collaboration programs. Loved it, had great opportunities to travel to many countries.
Nice.
And as I was doing that, I kept getting asked, or I started to get engaged in trying to find funding for the programs that we were running.
I see where this is going.
Yep, you can see where this is going. The G word is coming.
It's
coming.
coming.
It's coming. And so I started working on grants from federal government sources, from private foundations, to help support the programs that we were doing. And then I, after 7 or 8 years, I guess, of running the programs, I decided to make a transition entirely to the grants and fundraising side, since I
Okay.
really liked it. And I'd always been a writer at heart. I was my high school editor of my high school
Oh,
paper,
nice.
and all that kind of thing. And so this kind of finding out about grants and making that part of my profession was just such a neat mix at that point in my life. And so never looked back. Been a grant professional ever since.
And now it makes sense why you used to chair the publications committee. I'm like,
Yeah, there's a little
that
bit
makes
of that
sense.
The
too.
editing
Exactly.
coming back.
Exactly.
Little red pencil behind your ear,
Exactly.
ready to roll.
So
Very
that's how
cool.
I became a grant professional.
Thank you. Nice.
I love it. So, well, now you work for the Society for Neuroscience, which is a membership organization focused on advancing the understanding of the brain and the nervous system.
It's important.
We'd love to hear a little bit more about what your organization does and your role as the Director of Grants and Development. Because that's not, a lot of us work for nonprofits or universities, and this is so not that.
It's very different. So we are a trade association. We represent the neuroscience profession.
Okay.
So in many ways, how we feel that GPA is our professional home.
Yeah, that's
Yes.
true.
We consider ourselves the professional home for people that are studying neuroscience or
Okay.
practicing neuroscience research.
Wow.
So we have about 30,000 members. So we are a very large professional association.
Uh-huh.
And our membership spans from undergraduate students all the way to career neuroscience
Right.
researchers. So we span that whole gamut. And like GPA, we're here for our members. That's what the Society for Neuroscience,
Okay,
or SFN
sure.
as it's called, is that we're all about what we can do for our members to advance the neuroscience profession and to help them make the research advances in Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, or many other neuroscience research challenges. And so we support them through an annual conference, which has, unbelievably, it just finished, so we're all taking a big sigh of relief. It's usually about 25,000 people,
What?
which is
Wow.
just
Is it? Do you just
staggering.
take over an entire city somewhere in the Midwest? How does this work?
We alternate between Washington, D.C., Chicago, and San Diego.
I was
and
going to
then
say
we-
that
That's about all who
there's
can
no other
handle it.
place. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's amazing. It just, even though I'm not a scientist, when I'm there and just hear the hum and the activity that's going on the entire time, and all the exhibits and all the posters,
Wow.
it's amazing for a non-scientist to see that all. So we do that conference every year to bring people together, just like GPA brings together people at the GrantSummit. We publish a journal. We carry out a number of professional development and training activities throughout the year.
Okay.
So we do a lot of things to promote the profession and support our members. We support our members in public outreach and advocacy about the importance of neuroscience research
sure.
and the need for neuroscience funding. Then my job is kind of interesting because I head up the Grants and Development Department,
Right.
which is really looking at how we can grow our resources outside of some of the traditional revenue sources that associations have, from membership dues,
Yeah.
conference
Yeah.
fees, journal subscriptions. And so what I'm doing is working with federal government agencies, private foundations, corporations who have an interest in neuroscience and are interested in supporting one of our programs or supporting our organization,
Okay.
supporting an event, but all things around supporting our members. So it's actually fascinating, and it's the first
Yeah.
time in my career that I've been actually working for a trade association.
Right.
So,
It's a little.
which is one of the reasons why I did take the job.
Yeah,
is I was
something
like, This
different.
is really neat. I've been in nonprofits for 20 plus years, but never
Yeah.
this type of nonprofit. So
Oh, yeah.
it's fascinating.
Well, that's why I
It is
wanted to
fascinating.
ask, because I was like, this is not your typical
That's right.
organization a grant professional works for. And so that's very cool.
But as I've started to get to know, like, my peers in other scientific societies or
Uh-huh.
other associations, there are some comparable roles, but it's a relatively, I think, newer development or
Yeah.
another way of kind of approaching things.
Yeah, absolutely.
So speaking of another way of approaching things,
Mm-hmm.
what really caught our eye this year was the title of the presentation. Now, by the time people hear this, you will have made at the Grant Summit, right? I want to make sure I get the title right. It's
Okay.
And the Oscar goes to securing grants for your award and prize program. And that's not something I was trying to see. I think I've come to at least 15
Grant Summits.
Grant Summits. They used to be called GPA annual conference, but at any rate, many of them. And I'd never seen something like this in the conference lineup before. And so I was just curious if you could maybe walk us through how you came about developing that. And as you said, sort of bouncing off your last answer, it's like it's a different, it's not grants for a nonprofit, it's sort of a different spin on that. And so just whatever you would love to share with us about that.
Absolutely.
We would love to hear it.
And I had never seen it at one of these conferences.
Nope,
and so
nope,
that's one of
it's
the
a new
reasons why
one.
I thought, well, maybe this might be of interest. And I think it's an area that I didn't expect to be involved in, but it's an amazing way to search for grants and develop grant funding relationships. And so basically what the Society for Neuroscience has, so we've been around for 50 years, and I think 8 or 9 years into our existence, the society started to establish awards to recognize a major achievement in the neuroscience field.
Sure.
And so that's grown to the point now where we have 18 awards and prizes,
Oh, wow.
which is amazing. And
That's a
and
lot.
I'll tell you a little bit more about them.
But if you've got 40,000 members.
Well, that's true.
That
That's
makes
true.
sense.
That's
Yeah.
true. Okay,
Exactly.
that's fair.
But so some of those awards and prizes had been supported by an external funder, like a foundation or a corporation. But what my role and the role of my team is really to be looking at these and I think being intentional about seeing where there's opportunities where some of our funding partners or potential funding partners have a mutual interest in advancing neuroscience and advancing a specific area of neuroscience. And so that's how it came about that that's my job is to be looking at where we can grow our awards program, where we can bring in additional funders, making sure that our existing funders around awards are are working with us collaboratively and getting what they want out of it as well.
Sure.
So it's an amazing set of activities. And the thing I think is really that I didn't really know beforehand is the opportunity out there to pursue and secure grants for an award that your nonprofit may want to put out there.
That is not something that I have ever pursued before, so.
Because I just
And-
assumed there wouldn't be funding
Right.
for something like that.
But what I think is really interesting and what I think is really important is the majority of grants that I've secured for awards and prizes come outside of a competitive cycle. In other
Aha.
words, they're sort of a discretionary type of activity that a foundation has an interest in a specific strategic area, and it matches with this award.
Okay, that makes
and we
sense.
work with them on how we can make this come about. So it's a wonderful opportunity to, we're not looking for operational expenses or program expenses in the traditional
Sure.
in the traditional sense
Yeah.
of grant opportunities out there. These are pretty much, I don't want to say one-offs, but there's specific, unique cultivation opportunities that come
Right.
about.
That's very cool.
That's cool. Learning
Yeah.
something new.
Absolutely. Well, and what's interesting is a couple of years ago, Lisa Jackson and I did a journal article in the GPA Journal about the value of awards, because sometimes I think people can see awards and think, oh, it doesn't mean anything. But it really, I mean, awards are a great way to not only recognize great works that are taking place, but to recognize the value of the people and the things that people are bringing to the table. And I think it's also a great way to create a legacy of these are the people who came before them. And the reason we're where we are today is because we have stood on their shoulders. And so that was, we wrote a whole article about like
true.
awards are important and you should be proud of them.
Absolutely. I mean, and there's awards are such a wonderful way to bring additional visibility.
True.
And highlight your mission, the mission of your organization or the cause, because
Yeah.
that's what it's celebrating, an achievement
Yeah.
under your organization's mission or cause. And so it's a wonderful way to highlight that. And there's a number of different ways you can even take that further by having like an awards gala, an awards reception, or some type
That's
of
true.
award. I mean, some type of an event
Yeah.
that brings people together around the award. So overall, it's a really good way to advance an organization's mission. Then the other thing is that most awards are not one-off things. Most organizations don't give out an award one year and never do it again.
That's
Yeah.
true.
It's something that is very much a long-term or an event that's in perpetuity, which
Yeah.
is the ideal goal in fundraising for awards.
Absolutely. Well, that leads greatly into our next question is what types of awards does your society give out?
Sure. So the types of awards we give out are primarily focused around recognition in some way, shape, or form. And we actually have 4 categories of awards. The first one is we call it Outstanding Career or Lifetime type of awards. So these are recognizing individuals that have career-long accomplishments or major research achievements in the case of neuroscience.
Yeah.
So these are kind of more like the Nobel Prize type of
Sure.
recognition
Yeah.
of a career-long contribution. We have a second category that's actually sort of the opposite, in which we're focused on early career awards, so supporting outstanding students, outstanding theses, outstanding postdoctoral fellows, and people that are beginning their journey and have made great accomplishments already.
Yeah.
Nice.
And then we have a third category that's focused on awards honoring those who have promoted and mentored women in neuroscience, because that's one of the preferences or one of the strategic directions of our association is to try to narrow the gender gap that had existed in many science fields. And then we have a fourth category, which is focused on science education and outreach. So this is to recognize people who have gone beyond research and are out there advocating for neuroscience, doing public outreach, getting into schools, and just disseminating the value and importance of neuroscience. So we cover
That's
all
a
of those
lot.
areas. And what I think is really important, and I think anyone who is in the grants field and maybe in an organization doing something different, not neuroscience necessarily. There's so many angles you could take these awards. If you think about the population that you serve, there's many different ways you could think about how you could honor specific achievements or specific groups or specific career paths in your field.
That's cool.
It also makes me think about the strategies. You've talked about sort of generally about some of them already, like the strategies for even securing that funding. And as you spoke, it made me think some of these might be more straight ahead grant skills in terms of defining the program and talking about outcomes and all of that. But then you're actually bringing in, it sounds to me like you're bringing in more fundraising development strategies into that too. And I know for me, I enjoy going back and forth between grants and fundraising, but I'm wondering, am I on the right track with that? And what are some examples maybe for people who have been strictly involved in maybe pre-award grant writing, but want to, or like, wait a minute, we could do awards, we could go do this kind of thing. What are some strategies that they might need to think about?
It's a great question. And I would say, well, number one, some of the best practice strategies in grant seeking apply here.
Okay.
In terms of doing your research, well, first of all, identifying what the need is. Is there an area that has not been recognized in our field that desperately needs to be recognized and it meets our mission? So number one, just thinking about focus on your own mission and what's needed there. But second, looking and researching potential funders, and there may be some existing funders, which is something I definitely want to talk about, or there might be new funders, but again, doing the research. And then the cultivation process is similar. Where it may be different, and I think this is what you're alluded to, is that there's different types of funders for awards. Some are foundations that may want a traditional grant proposal, and that is what's prepared, so that's something that's all very familiar to us. And same with some corporate foundations. But in other cases, it might be an individual, or it might be a fund.
Like a donor advised fund?
A donor advised fund, yes. Where the product that might be presented to them might not technically be a grant proposal per se, but it is a proposal. It is a plan that mirrors many elements of the grant process.
That's fair.
So, then one of the sort of the holy grail of the award funding process is endowments.
Oh, sure.
If an individual, or in the case we've had a couple of foundations that have ultimately decided to give us an endowment where they provide all the money up front for us to run an award program in perpetuity. And so that entails an endowment agreement, which is a little bit different.
Sure.
But again, it entails many of the same components that would be in a grant agreement.
So a lot of those transferable skills about
Exactly.
describing it, talking about outcomes, measurements, reporting, all those different need.
Yeah,
Well,
exactly.
and for those people who are fairly new to grant seeking and grant writing, we all know you can't go into Candid Foundation Directory online and say, I want to find a funder who gives awards. Like that's real. But you're looking for funders who are in line with your mission. They like to fund the type of work that y'all do anyway.
Exactly.
And those are the ones you're looking for.
Exactly. And I've found that our existing funders, and this again is probably one of the best practices in grants of fundraising, are one of our most likely supporters of a future award.
That makes, because they know the organization,
They know
right?
the organization, they're behind the mission, and even though they might have supported our organization in a number of different ways, in such a way that we said, well, we're not going back to that well for this next program or whatever, but for an award, it's totally different. It's a more almost a lifelong contribution that the organization, the funding organization, is going to make. And so I've really found that exploring first with your existing funders is an incredibly important strategy, and also makes them feel really good. There's been a couple of cases where there's one case where we had a funder for several years that decided to go a different direction, and all of a sudden this award was ready for a potential new funding partner, and we just thought of an organization that we've been working with on a number of different things, and we knew they were interested in supporting young scientists, which this award was focused on. And so we went to them and said, hey,
We have
you're
an
the first
opening.
people that came to mind, and they
Yeah.
really appreciated that. So
Nice.
it's a really strong funding strategy to think
Yeah.
about your existing funders first when when pursuing awards.
Makes a
Yeah.
lot of sense.
Yeah. Well, and I'm curious too, are most funders, if they are supporting an award program, are they somehow tied to it in name, or some of them are just like, we're happy to give the money, or how are they usually recognized for that sort of funding?
That's a great question. And it spans the gamut. There's some funders that are more involved and engaged than others. But we do recognize all of our funders and all the public materials. The funders are not involved in the selection process.
Yeah,
Typically,
fair.
in the grant agreement or the funding agreement, it may be specified the areas of interest that led them to want to support this award. But in terms of the selection process, that's a totally different process.
Nice.
And by the way, it's kind of an aside, but the selection process usually entails a review committee.
Sure.
And grant professionals are fantastic people to run an internal review committee with panelists. That's with an application process, a rubric, scoring rubric.
Scoring
Have
rubric. We
heard
love
about
those.
that?
Oh, wait,
Yeah.
what?
Do all that. So that's another reason why I found the grant professionals are really apt professionals to be leading awards and prizes program, because
Interesting.
We know how to
review
do it.
panels and
Yeah.
all.
Sure.
We're usually the ones applying to them, not running them, and so it's kind of a nice chance to be on the other side. So for funder recognition, going back to your question, in some cases we recognize the funder's name in the award.
Yep.
So it might be a joint SFN blank award and such
Okay.
and such. And so in some cases we do that. In many cases, an award is named after somebody who passed away
Yeah.
that the society and our collaborators wanted to recognize. But we always recognize them. We make sure there's a venue for them to meet the supported awardee.
Oh, nice.
And
That's
be able
good.
to talk with them. We found that some of our funders, and I can think of a couple of foundations in particular, who every year they interview the awardees for their own publications. And so it's
It's a win-win.
Yeah.
it's a win-win.
Nice.
Exactly.
That's great.
Exactly.
That's really cool.
Great. So, well, if an organization is listening to this and they don't have any sort of award program, would you encourage them to develop one?
Yeah.
And, well, why is that?
No, absolutely. I would definitely encourage it, as well as to, it's not a light endeavor, so there's several things that I would definitely
Yeah.
encourage them to consider. But number one, going back to what I was saying beforehand about should they do it, if an organization is interested in advancing its mission in new ways and bringing new light and visibility to their mission, an award is an excellent way to do it if it hasn't already been done. So
Yeah.
it meets the mission, and again it just brings more attention to your cause. So absolutely, some things I would encourage an organization to think about are, well, first of all, just making sure that there's internal understanding and agreement on what are we trying to recognize. Is
Right.
it this type of achievement? Is it this? Is it that? As with everything else, there needs to be board and internal consensus on the strategic direction. I think an organization generally, I haven't seen many new organizations, new nonprofits that immediately start giving out awards. Generally are organizations that have reached a certain level of visibility and recognition within their community, whatever their community or field might be, so that people look at them and think of them naturally
Right.
as the right place to give out this award.
Yeah.
So I would encourage an organization to also think about kind of the infrastructure and making sure that they have the resources to
Right.
be able to run an awards program, to stand up one of our beloved review committees and that sort of thing, that they have the resources to, if there's a monetary part of an award, that they have the payment processes in place. And in some cases, and this is really something I don't think an organization has to worry about too much at the beginning, but if they do go down the road of more sophisticated award funding vehicles like endowments, then sometimes that requires more legal expertise
That's true.
to help navigate that. But again, that's not something that I would say should preclude an organization from thinking in this direction.
Yeah. Very nice.
One thing I love about doing this podcast is I always learn.
Mm-hmm.
I learn while doing, and it's fun. And I had no idea about all of this, but it makes perfect sense the way you explain it, and the transferable skills and all that good stuff. If you would like for people to find you and maybe ask some questions about this or whatever works for you, what's the best way for people to find you?
Many ways, obviously, if anyone's here at the conference, I'm happy to talk with
Absolutely.
them. I have the session that I'm doing on November 2nd. I could be reached through LinkedIn, David H. Lindeman, through my email, and I don't know if that's information that you can provide.
I can
through
put
the
it in our
podcast.
show
That could
notes,
be-
yeah.
that
Yeah,
could
we
be
could
there,
totally
but
do that.
Absolutely.
Thank
I'd be happy
you.
to, because again, I think it's sort of what we're talking about today, and part of the reason why I decided to do this presentation. I do think that this is somewhat of a grant-seeking endeavor that many people may not think about or know about.
I didn't
but
think
they might
about it.
already have awards or be thinking about this, and there's a great way to put it together and develop more grant resources for your organization.
I think it can also be like an interesting way to think about your career in terms of working for an association
Yeah.
as a grant professional.
Absolutely.
Just a great example of how to transition those skills.
Absolutely, and I'd be happy to talk to folks about that as well, because
You
I
heard
did that
it here.
transition and I never expected to, and I love it.
Awesome.
Nice.
Very
Well,
good.
thank you so much. We really appreciate it.
Well, thank
Yes,
you. This has
thank
been
you.
wonderful.
Excellent.